Hello, and how's everyone doing today? Welcome to the channel. If you're a returning viewer, glad to have you back, and welcome to another episode of Justin Talks Games. Today I'd like to touch on something called the Umbrella Curse. This is something that's been kind of talked about a little more recently regarding Resident Evil 9, and, I just want to give my thoughts on it. Nobody knows what it is. The director is still kind of being hush-hush about some things. Of course, after they've been very tight-lipped about Resident Evil 9, we haven't seen any Raccoon City stuff at all, which is kind of concerning to me, but, I'll talk about that in a whole different video. Yeah, so the Umbrella Curse. So before we get into that, make sure to grab your drinks. I got mine here. Grab your snacks. My snacks are in the back room. As you guys know, I don't like to eat my snacks while on video. So yeah, like I said, grab your drinks. Grab your snacks. And let's get into this. So the Umbrella Curse. So Nakanishi answered a question. Someone asked about what's the Umbrella Curse. And essentially what he said is it's something that affects all of the Raccoon City. Oh, excuse me for the coughing. It's someone that affects all of the Raccoon City survivors. Now, I don't know if you would count Chris as a Raccoon City survivor because he wasn't in technically he wasn't in Resident Evil 2 and 3, but he worked for the RPD and he was in the Spencer estate, 3 months prior. So just for the sake of this video, and it's called the Umbrella Curse, and I know he said it affects people Raccoon City, and I know it's a different incident, but I'm going to include the mansion incident just for the sake of the video. So he said that it affects the survivors of Raccoon City. Now, I've seen some theories, interesting theories. I've seen one on Let's Talk Resident Evil. Anthony and John, they talked a little bit about this, and their theory was pretty cool, pretty interesting. Basically they said that the Umbrella Curse is maybe the virus, maybe that's why he has the black on his neck, and that's why he's that's why he's wearing his gloves. While that is really cool, it's an interesting thought, we also got to think about the other characters too, right? So like you have Leon, Chris, Jill, technically Barry because he was in the end of Resident Evil 3. Then you got Sherry. Who else? Carlos. All of the Outbreak characters. And then just random survivors who happen to survive. Because there's no way that, only like a handful of people survived when Raccoon City was like over 100,000 people. There's no way it was only a handful of people. There's definitely people who escape through the barriers and stuff that we just don't hear about. Like, come on. So, like I said, they think it's an infection. Now, technically, if that was the case, wouldn't all of those characters and all those people, wouldn't they have, all these marks and be infected as well? Also, excuse me, if that was the case, Leon specifically, since they brought up Leon. So Leon specifically, if he had this, virus, if it's a virus, wouldn't they have caught it on tests and stuff? Because Leon's a government agent. Excuse me, I would assume that he has, like regular tests and stuff done to him because of the line of work that he does. They would have caught something in his tests and stuff. Also, on top of that, he also got infected with Las Plagas in Resident Evil 4. And then in Death Island, they were all infected with a variant of the T-virus. For those of you who don't know, all of the animated movies, so like from the Degeneration all the way up to Death Island, They are all canon. They're all in the game universe. The only ones that are not are any of the live action movies. They are not part of the universe. Only the animated movies and the games. Um, so, anyways, so they also got all cleared of that virus as well in that movie. So you would think that the government or whoever the doctors, whatever, doing these, regular checkups on Leon because of his line of work, they definitely would have caught something. Now, there is the chance that, because of the government, of course, they just didn't tell him. But at the end of the day, if they knew about it and they didn't tell him, that would make him like a liability because if he turns evil because of the virus, right? That takes control of him, and he's as powerful and as strong and training and everything that he's done so far. They'd have a hard time taking him down. So that would not make any sense that they wouldn't say anything. Now, I have a different perspective on this umbrella curse. Um, My thoughts are now he said that it affects all the survivors of Raccoon City. Now, it could also be looked at in a different way. It could be, mental states and physical states, right? So as I said before about, canon and stuff like that, the remakes and the originals are both canon. So you can take things from both of them and, it's still canon. So let's talk about Resident Evil 3 Remake, the beginning of the game for a second here. So when you first start the game, you're playing a dream sequence of Jill. She gets out of her bed, and she walks to the bathroom. And when you open the bathroom door, and she looks in the mirror, she is fully, infected by T virus. She's a zombie, and she grabs the gun. She goes to shoot herself, and then she wakes up. So you can see that the events three months earlier. I'm pretty sure there's 3 months between Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 months. I know the 3 months from Resident Evil 2 and 3 to Veronica, but I can't remember if it's 3 months. We'll just go with that. Anyway, so she's still affected greatly by those events. Obviously, the nightmares, seeing herself as a zombie. So she's having trouble sleeping. In her apartment, you can see pills and stuff all over the place. So obviously she's having PTSD, and she's also having bad sleeping because of it. So I would say that it's greatly affected her. Greatly affected her. Look at Leon. From the franchise as a whole, not the remakes, not the original, just every single thing, as a whole. To start off, Leon was kind of depressed anyway because his girlfriend left him before the events of Resident Evil 2. So that's why he was late. He was actually, drinking, he was drunk, that's why he, missed his first day. Anyway, so you have that. And then on top of that, you have, all the events of Resident Evil 2 that took place. And he was quite young at the time. I think he's actually younger than Chris and Jill, I think. And you got to think, he wasn't a special tactics guy. He wasn't a special unit. He was just a rookie, regular police officer, first day, all that stuff, right? So it affected him very greatly. Even he talks about or is brought up in almost everything that he's in. So in the animated movies, as Raccoon's brought up, a few times. In the games, it's brought up as well. Raccoon City has deeply, deeply affected him. Mentally, scarred him and everything. So I would call that a curse as well. And then you have like the physical side of things. Look at Sherry in Resident Evil 2. She was implanted by William Birkin with a G embryo. Um, and then at the end of the game, obviously, she gets cured. The, thing comes out of her, which is good. Um, but at the end of the day, she got the good effects for the G virus. So she has the rapid healing and all that stuff. She got very, very, very lucky. um, that happened. The downside to that is that she had to endure many, many years of torturous experiments and, just scientific things from the government on her because of the G virus. She lightly talks about her experiences and stuff in Resident Evil 6. And she's had a terrible, terrible time. She now works for them. I think that's more so. I think the government kind of forced her, in my opinion. I don't know if that's brought up in 6. Um, I haven't played it in a long time, and I don't want to play it again, honestly. Um, but I do know that she had a very rough time growing up because of the G virus in her and the government trying to learn things from it. So, I mean, I would say that's a curse. That's a curse that, Umbrella, G virus, all the terrible things that happened to her, that's going to follow her too. That's going to follow her for the rest of her life too. Um, I can't say much for Chris or Carlos or anybody like that because we haven't really spent that much time like seeing like the effects, right? I mean, Chris obviously becomes a drunk because he keeps losing his men and all that. That could also factor from Resident Evil 1 to onwards. I mean, it's called Veronica as well, right? Um, but in Resident Evil 6, we see him, he's, drunk, he's completely out of his mind. He's basically a completely different person. He essentially blocked everything from his mind. I think that could just be, not just because of what happened, in Resident Evil 6. I think, that's years and everything that's piled up, the events of Resident Evil 1, the events of Code Veronica, all that kind of stuff. And then, it's just how do you deal with that? And he also lost all of his men in Resident Evil 6. On top of that, it would definitely take a toll. So yeah, I would say Umbrella's curse has followed him as well. Um, but then in Resident Evil 8, he seems to be, level headed. He seems to, have his, stuff together. He seems to be a bit better, more clear headed at the end of Resident Evil 6 because of Pierce and stuff. He helps him through his issues and everything. Um, but yeah, so from what we've seen, we've seen Jill's issues. We know about Leon's issues. I would say we've seen Chris's issues. We don't really know anything about Claire afterwards. She works for TerraSave, but she hasn't been as deeply affected as the others. As we don't really know, hasn't really shown that side of her. Same thing with Barry. I mean, we haven't heard anything from Barry since Revelations 2. But yeah, I would say personally that the Umbrella Curse could be more of a mental and physical standpoint. Because you got to think, right? These when things get into your head, sometimes they never ever leave. So like with Jill's PTSD, and then on top of see, it's a double whammy for Jill, because she has the events of Resident Evil 1 all in her brain. She has the events of Resident Evil 3, all over her head with Nemesis and now being infected and all that. And then on top of that, she has Wesker, who kidnapped her, forced her to do evil things, and Wesker was part of Umbrella, right? At one point in time, Wesker was part of Umbrella, so I would say the umbrella curse, in my way of thinking, probably more so affected Jill than it did Leon. When it comes to Leon's infection that we've seen on the neck, I don't know what that could be. We see a lot of the zombies, they have black and stuff all over them. I don't know. I don't want to make any, guesses and be wrong. I don't think it's the umbrella curse. Like I said, I think the umbrella curse is more like a mental and physical thing. Like I said, that to me that would make more sense. To make it just a virus and then miraculously, everybody who was at Raccoon City is now going to turn into a zombie or something. That to me that would come out of left field. That would make no sense. Why wait like 30 years and then boom, you're a zombie. Boom, you're a zombie. You're a zombie now, and now you're a zombie. It it's just it wouldn't make any sense. It would definitely make more sense from a mental perspective, because Umbrella technically haunts these characters still 30 years later. To me, that is more a curse than being infected with, something. That's just my thoughts. I think if they go down that route, that would be much better than saying, "Oh, the umbrella curse is it's a virus and they're gonna change into monsters now," whereas the umbrella curse it's a mental thing. You're cursed with umbrella. They're with you and in your mind with all the shit that you've been through. You'll never forget umbrella, ever. And I think that's more of a curse than anything. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and definitely let me know what you guys think. And I hope you all have a very wonderful day.